the National Science Foundation, the Annenberg Foundation, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, annual financial support from viewers like you, the National Institute of Mental Health, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and these additional funders.
What is language? Everybody knows, thank heavens.
Is language simple or is language complex?
The girl that's the house of's father.
This is part one of a series on the human language.
The question is, how can you learn so much from so little?
The question is, how does a child know what a word is?
How is it that we can so alter our thought patterns to fit into the linear arrangement of any particular language?
I didn't know how, did you know me and Anthony broke up? You did. I thought you had already broke up. No, he broke up with me, so I could break up with him. Isn't that awful?
What specific biological endowment could we have that allows us to do this?
Is there something true, some core of properties true of all human languages?
Sturch prst skrs krk.
Panini skam good mat neerlekker kan nie.
Как понимаете, распознанными чайным кухня заям прохлая. Зин, дрстак я, как ты
How do people simply interact with language? How do people do what I am now doing? Or if you meet somebody, say at a bus stop, and you start having a conversation, how do you do it?
Take care of yourself.
People don't think when they speak, they just speak.
This is a report on the study of an enigma. Language is the most human thing there is about being human. Yet most people don't think much about it. Traditionally, linguists have studied the history, vocabulary, and grammar of the world's languages. But within our generation, new theories have revolutionized our thinking. Today, linguists ask questions about how we use language and how language functions inside the human mind. For example, why are languages filled with rules we all follow without knowing why?
How would you describe this?
Well, I know it's supposed to be a big red balloon.
How about a red big balloon? Could this be a red big balloon?
A big red balloon.
Okay. Do you have any idea why you feel more comfortable saying a big, and you have a sense of why that feels better than a red big balloon?
I have no reason why.
3 big red round plastic balls. Not big 3 round plastic red big balls.
Linguists claim that language is rule governed. What rules?
Stop and go traffic. Should be go and stop traffic. You can't stop until you've gone.
You can reclimb and you can re-institutionalize, but you can't re-fall down. I don't know why that is. It's peculiar. I mean, why can't you re-fall down?
And you can say things like, don't rouse up the natives, but you can't say don't rouse up them. You have to say don't rouse them up.
Language is untidy. Language is a mess.
That John left surprised me. What's the that doing there? I mean, everybody knows you can't say John left surprised me. There's something wrong with that. The rules of English say you got to have a that in front. Well, why?
Un gros ballon rouge.
Could you do it the other way around?
Un ballon rouge gros.
And is that fine or?
No, it's not. The first one is fine. The other one you just will never say it.
A big red balloon.
Those are just the rules of my language that I learned totally unconsciously as a little child.
It's the same old story.
What's going on in here?
It's the old same story?
Who or what tells us how to say it?
The language faculty is a system, a subsystem of the brain, of the human brain. Its major elements don't appear to exist in other similar organisms. And that organ of the brain yields a language under appropriate conditions. It's partially tuned by the environment, but to a large extent it appears to be determined by our biological endowment and hence essentially invariant across the species.
There have really been three major revolutions in modern linguistics. The first, about 200 years ago, was the discovery that sound changes are regular, that you can reconstruct ancient languages and talk about how languages changed from the ancient times to the present. The second was at the turn of this century, where it was discovered that languages themselves are systematic, that there are rules governing how languages are put together. The third revolution came with Noam Chomsky in his book Syntactic Structures in 1957.
In 1957, Chomsky published this little book, Syntactic Structures, and it almost immediately revolutionized the field. It had a profound influence on everyone who read it carefully, and the reason for this is the beauty of the analyses that Chomsky presented. He was able to show that there were patterns when it had just looked like there were many separate facts, and he was able to come up with very simple rules for explaining these patterns.
Basically what Chomsky said is that your sights aren't set high enough. You're asking the wrong questions. You're not asking the most interesting questions. What you're asking is, well, we know language is a system, so how should we divide it up? Where should we draw the line in the word? Where should we draw the line in the sentence? What are the pieces? Chomsky said, let's ask a different question. Let's ask a much more ambitious question. Let's ask the question, what is a possible human language?
What was so appealing about this analysis and what was so revolutionary about it is it showed that there's some process in your head, some rule, some pattern that you have abstractly, and you use this rule in producing sentences and in understanding sentences. That is, he moved linguistics away from merely gathering and investigating sentences that had already been produced and moved it towards the investigation of human potentiality. What kinds of sentences can you produce? What kinds of sentences can you understand?
Once you say, what is a possible human language, in a way you're saying, what is a possible human being? How does the human mind work?
Well,
the most elementary property of human language that one can imagine is that we can create new expressions which express new thoughts. So, for example, the sentences that I'm now producing, you may not have heard, I may not have said before, maybe they're new in the history of the human race.
Here's something no one has ever said before. Toss that anchor over here. I have room for 2 or 3 more of them in my hip pocket.
The point of a language is to be able to say things you never said before and never heard before, and to understand things the first time you hear them that have never been said before to your knowledge and maybe never been said before at all. But if you're going to be able to say and understand new things, you must have acquired something very general, a system.
There perhaps in English there are about 40 sounds. The sounds get combined to form, most people know 40,000 words, something of that sort.
Swimming.
Cacophony.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Lunch. Words are built out of sounds, and there are a limited number of them. Sentences are built out of words, and there's no limit to the number of sentences that you can compose in a language.
You could say that words are like atoms. The way atoms are in chemistry, as the basic building blocks, those are what the words are. They're fairly solid things, and you take these atoms and you put them together to make up the molecules or the sentences.
I remember Senator Joseph McCarthy at one time saying, that's the most unheard of thing ever heard of. You know, nobody could have invented that sentence before McCarthy spoke it.
It's really a deceptively simple system. The genius of the system is that with a small number of words and this system of grammar, you can make up an infinite number of sentences. You can make up a sentence to fit any occasion.
And Mommy just goes to sleep, but Daddy just go, and Daddy just,
The system starts with words, deceptively simple. But the question is, what is a word?
He went to,
How does a child know what a word is?
to his friend's house.
You could ask somebody, what is a word? And most people think they know what a word is until you ask them.
A word is,
A word is...
And you trying to find it, and you can't put your finger on it. You don't know.
A word is...
Pencil.
language. A word is something that someone thought up a long, long time ago.
What is a word? That's actually an extraordinarily difficult question.
I haven't the ghost of an idea. I can't even make up a plausible evasion.
You could say a word is the smallest separate piece of a language that all by itself will have a meaning.
On the other hand,
there are words that are composed themselves of smaller units that bear meaning, like kicked, where kick has a meaning and id has another meaning, named like past tense.
And I didn't do that. Nt. Is it a word?
One of my favorite words is anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's an interesting word, of course, because everybody thinks that it's the longest word in the English language. In fact, there are many words in English that are far longer than anti-disestablishmentarianism, most of them chemical terms.
Okay, here goes. The longest word in Webster's 7th is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silico-volcanoconiosis, a disease of the lungs.
Infixes and prefixes and suffixes.
I used to wonder, pre and suff are prefixes. Suff is the prefix of suffix. Is fix the suffix for prefix and suffix?
Words seem to be somehow indivisible, but you look at them closely and they've got all kinds of little parts to them.
What's this? I know there's a word for this.
I think, for example, of the word apodictic. Now, that is not only a legal phonological structure, I happen to know it's a word because I've seen it in print, and I've even looked it up in the dictionary, but I simply can't remember what it means.
I haven't a clue what apodictic means.
Mujinga, that's my name. I'm from Africa, Zaire. Mujinga means a child born with umbilical cord all over her body.
Most words certainly are complicated words, like human or like generous, are really small, tiny sentences all wrapped up in one set of phonemes.
That's a single Turkish word, one of my favorite words because it comes out as a whole sentence in English. It means, are you one of those that we haven't been able to Europeanize?
One example from the Eskimo language I work with, which is called Alutiq, is the word ayai tau ho jumin tach bungaka, which means, don't you want to go window shopping with me?
An easy thing to say for me, since I deal with computers a lot, is that a word is the sequence of letters between two blanks.
But what about when we speak? We don't have little spaces when we speak. We just run everything together.
O-M-M-I-N-A, omina. It means I am going to.
Mercy-dotes and dozy-dotes and a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you? Mercy-dotes and dozy-dotes and a kiddly ivy too, wouldn't you? Somebody's flat.
You know, when you listen to people talk, unless they deliberately pause between the pieces of what they're saying, it all runs together.
How do we know where the gaps are in between the words? Because this all sounds like one whole sound. This is just one long sound to me. But you know that I said this is just one long sound to me.
Why are you weary? Why are you weary? Why are you weary? I might walk up to you and say, "Stewin'," or "Chichit."
What do you want to do now?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Dunno.
An apple? Okay, so will you go home now for an apple? Okay.
I'm gonna go get the bus and go home.
This may be the hardest thing that the brain ever has to do, is to figure out those boundaries at the words that people have just run together in speech.
Why are you weary? Why are you weary?
People have invested millions of dollars and Lord knows how many hours in trying to devise machinery that will be able to perform this task of breaking spoken language up into words so that it can be understood. And yet a child by the age of 1 is perfectly able to understand speech, natural speech, and just pick it apart into words. So what's a word? They're very slippery objects. They're difficult to deal with. Words stand for things. The word tree stands for a tree. But words are more than that, after all. The word tree doesn't just stand for that tree or even any individual tree. It stands for the general notion of a tree, the concept of a tree. That's what Plato would have told us. But then that raises the question of concepts. What's a concept?
What do we have in our minds before we speak? Are there concepts we do not need to invent because we are born already knowing them? Plato said so, and so does Chomsky.
Well, suppose I have, say, a box, and I have a marble inside the box and a marble outside the box. And I ask which marble is near the box. Well, the answer is that the marble outside the box is either near the box or not near it, but the marble in the box can't be near it. Now, again, that's one of those simple things that we ought to be surprised about. How does a child know that a marble that's in a box can't be near the box?
Suppose I had a box, and I put one marble outside the box, and I put another marble inside the box. And I asked you which marble is near the box. Which one would you say? Charlie?
Outside.
The one outside? What would you say?
The one outside.
Why?
Because the one outside is really out. The one inside is just like it's inside the box. And also it isn't even near it. It's touching the box.
Notice if the box is a geometrical object, say a sphere in the geometrical sense, then or a cube, the marble can be near the box. The marble is near the box is the surface. So the geometrical object is the surface. So something inside it can be near it, just as something outside it can be near it. But we don't develop concepts like that naturally. We have to invent them in some other faculty of the mind.
The one outside because the one inside isn't near.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't actually that both of them are near. One is near and one is not.
Okay, now which one is it?
Yeah.
The concept of box that we actually develop is a very obscure one. It includes the interior, but it doesn't matter what's inside it. So if the box is filled up with marbles or it's just full of air, it's the same box. Our concept of box includes the interior, but it doesn't care what's inside the interior. Now that's an extremely abstract concept, far beyond what any evidence could ever drive. There's no evidence that the child has available that tells the child that the box isn't just its surface. And in fact, if we were to invent a science, we would make it just the surface, as we do in geometry and physics. Now, what that means is that the concept, with all of its incredible intricacy, must be fixed by the mind and just keyed by some trivial fact about the environment.
There she goes. Oh, where did it go? Where's the duck?
Where's the duck?
We just know that a box has an interior. But it doesn't matter what's inside. What a concept.
In everyday conversation, we are enormously creative.
Boy, one more minute of those hot lights and I'd be fried shish kebab.
It's almost certain that any 20-word sentence you hear will be a brand new, a newly minted, newly created sentence that has never been uttered before, and probably you've never heard it before.
Here's another one no one has ever said before. I'm going over to the softball game and beat up Hitler's widow.
What language is really about is putting the words together into these sentences.
Suppose that it's possible to choose the next word in what you're going to say as any one of 100 words. No, make it even easier. Say any one of 10 words that you can use to continue. So the first word that you pick is one of 10. But now you go on and you say a second word, and it is also one of 10. So the total number of possible combinations of two words will be 10 times 10, or 100. Now you go on to say a third word, and there are 10 possibilities there, and that means now we have 1,000 three-word combinations. And if we go on to a fourth word, there will be 10,000. So the number of possible messages is increasing very rapidly as the length of the message increases.
A little hat, and in that little hat, he had a little cat, and in that little cat, he had a little rat, and in that little rat, he had a little mouse.
This is the desk that sits in the office that I work in. Now we could take that still larger sentence and put it together into a larger sentence still. This is the clutter that's piled on the desk that sits in the office I work in. Doesn't seem to be any limit on that.
How many sentences would we have if we had, say, 20-word sentences? Well, that would be 10 to the 20th power. How big a number is 10 to the 20th power? Well, let's see. To compare it with, there's something like 3 times 10 to the 9th seconds in a century.
He had an eraser, and in that little eraser, there was a clock. And in that little clock, there was a hand.
Period.
One of the basic formal properties that allows for this creativity is the process of taking a sentence and putting it inside another sentence to create a still larger sentence.
That was really long.
There's no longest sentence, and that's why the number of possible sentences is countably infinite.
General Alexander Haig, when he was Secretary of State, once told a Senate Foreign Relations Committee, "There is a conscious castration of America's eyes and ears around the world," whatever that meant. But surely nobody could ever have spoken that sentence before Haig, and nobody will ever want to speak it again.
Have a nice day.
Nice talking to you.
Same here.
But what about shorter sentences, 10-word sentences, 5-word sentences?
25 cents, 5 for $1. It takes 2 seconds.
Do you, Lydia, take Raphael in holy matrimony for those you both shall live?
Yes.
Of course. Some short sentences can be used over and over and over.
Do you, Carlos, take Raquel in holy matrimony for those you both shall live? Do you, Chimeng, take Chunhan in holy matrimony for those you both shall live? Do you, Byron, take Aracelis in holy matrimony for those you both shall live?
5 for $1. It takes 2 seconds.
As you both have consented in wedlock.
But short sentences can be improbable, too.
That's your husband and wife. May kiss your bride. Kiss your bride, Raph. Kiss your bride.
For example, you probably never heard anyone say before, short sentences can be improbable, too.
Okay, Laura and Orlando.
We have a kind of tension operating here. We have a system that is very strict in certain ways, and yet one which allows you many degrees of freedom as long as you stay within the bounds of the system.
Next morning, just before
You've got words, a finite number of words. You've got a very small number of rules, and between them, you can make up an infinite number of sentences. That's the system.
Simple.
I got to go. Goodbye.
The very beginnings of science are always the capacity to be able to be amazed by apparently simple things. For example, if you assume that an apple falls to the ground because that's its natural place, so it's unsurprising, you have no science. If you begin to ask yourself, why does the apple fall to the ground and not rise to the sky? If you allow yourself to be puzzled by that simple fact, well, then you find you have a rather serious question before you, and science begins.
How did sound and meaning ever get linked together? When you think about it, there's really no two things that are more different from each other than sound and meaning. Meaning, the ideas in the brain, to put it in simple terms. Sounds, these things that come out of our lungs and our vocal cords, they're totally different. How did they ever get linked? What biological event could have created this? Well, the biological event was the creation of grammar, syntax. What grammar is a system that allows these mismatched components, sound and meaning, to be linked to each other.
The first task of grammar is to organize words in a line, one after another. An event is about to take place. Will we report it in the order in which things actually happened? Is there a natural order of events? A woman fell from the cable car. We say the woman first, then the cable car. Because the woman came first? But surely the cable car was already there before the woman fell.
It seems evident, if you compare your thoughts and perceptions to the things that you say, that there's a very direct relationship between what you experience and how you talk about it. But in fact, there's a great mystery. Because when we speak, we have to say things one word after another. We have no choice. That's the way language works. But when we see things or experience things, they don't necessarily come bit by bit in a linear order.
The boy kicks the ball. Which comes first in reality? The boy, then the kick, then the ball? This is one of the puzzles of syntax, that the form of a sentence is often independent of its meaning.
Because boy, ball, and kick can occur in any order in language. In perception, they occur simultaneously.
In fact, the order of the words doesn't seem to have anything to do with the order of events.
But we have to arrange it in one way or another in order to speak about it. One of the major tasks of using language is to take something which is essentially atemporal, nonlinear, and to arrange it in linear patterns in order to make different kinds of points.
Does the form of a sentence depend on its meaning?
There's a famous example sentence in linguistics that Chomsky's been talking about since the 50s. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Well, a small industry has been spawned by one linguistic example, namely colorless green ideas sleep furiously, which has been the source of poems and arguments and set to music and so on.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
This is a very interesting sentence because it shows that syntax can be separated from semantics, that form can be separated from meaning. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It doesn't seem to mean anything coherent, but it sounds like an English sentence. If you read it back to front, furiously sleep ideas green colorless, that wouldn't sound like English at all.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Well, that tells us that there's more to what determines the structure of a sentence than whether it has meaning or not.
If you tried out the sentence on a child, I bet the child would giggle. But I suspect that the reaction would be different if you tried out furiously, sleep, ideas, green, colorless. You might get a blank stare instead. For a sentence to be a sentence of English in terms of its structure, it doesn't seem to matter much what the words mean or whether they go together in a meaningful way, just that they go together in a way that obeys the rules of syntax.
Syntax, no other animal seems to have it. We have to assume, I think, that something so distinctive, so complex, so much at the basis of human achievement is an evolved capacity.
One term that Chomsky has used a lot is the term universal grammar. And this term flows naturally from the idea that you inherit many of the principles and processes involved in the grammar, your knowledge of your particular language.
There are 5,000, maybe more than 5,000 languages spoken in the world. But in fact, what Chomsky noticed is that these 5,000 languages of the world are really very, very similar.
As human beings, we are naturally interested in the differences among humans. We take the similarities among humans for granted. So we're interested in the way humans look different from one another, and their faces are so different, and their sizes are so different, and the way they behave is so different, and so on. From the point of view of, say, some Martian, we would all look alike, just as from our point of view, all frogs look alike. Now, from the point of view of the frog, frogs look, I'm sure, very much different from one another because they're interested in the differences among frogs. We just notice the overwhelming respects in which they're similar. Now, if we can make the leap of the imagination that enables us to look at ourselves the way we look at other organisms, we will quickly discover that we're remarkably alike.
Mine ear is much enamored of thy note.
In fact, the differences, the existing differences among human languages has in this sense been called by Chomsky trivial. Trivial compared with the differences between the human languages taken together and any other system of communication by other kinds of animals, by intelligent machines, and the like. These are all vastly different from the set of human languages, which by comparison are very, very much like each other.
Loma loma na tomba bakalo loma, tiko kina na vei matangali roka, e uasivi e kato toka ko laue loma, isa isa ko loma loma.
There are two major ground plans, two great options in building a language. Relying on the order of words to convey the meaning of your overall thought.
English.
Or changing the endings of the words one by one and then shuffling them around.
Latin.
For example, instead of counting on order as we do in English, we might do it by saying, Mary A. hit John'em, by which we mean that Mary is clearly the actor, the A word, and John is clearly the one acted upon, the word.
This is simply book in English. Well, in Russian it's kniga if I hold it up and show it to you. But if I say I'm holding it up or I'm reading it, then it becomes knigu rather than kniga. We change the ending because when we're acting on an object, we have to say it differently. These endings are what grammarians call inflections.
You might wonder how many languages use the order ground plan, how many languages use the inflectional ground plan. And it's very, very hard to answer a question like that because every language uses a little of both. In English, for example, we use word order very much, but we still have inflections like the plural S at the end of words is an inflection that signifies the number. over a period of time in the history of a language, it may change from being a highly inflected language to being a language without inflections, and then change back again.
We see this happening in English now if you think of the ending v on could've, should've, would've. That v isn't a word anymore. It's not have, it's just v. It's becoming a grammatical ending.
If there are universal features to human language, wouldn't that apply to all people everywhere? Even ancient people like the Walbri? Their language has been closely studied. What ground plan do they follow?
I'm studying the language of the Walbri people of Central Australia. The Walbri people are the Aboriginal inhabitants of a very vast area of Central Australia.
Mary Loughran, field linguist, has been living with the Walbri for over a decade.
The Walbri language is a very interesting language. Like other Central Australian languages, it has probably been spoken in relative isolation from non-Australian languages, possibly up to 60,000 years. So that makes it very interesting for research for linguists who are interested in finding out about differences between languages, but probably more particularly interested in finding about what is common to human language.
The Walbri people were nomads until a short time ago. Now they cluster in the town of Yuendamu, where they have adopted many European ways. As nomads, they value things they can carry in their heads instead of on their backs, like language. Stories which can be told in paintings or in words. Here, the subtle use of language is highly prized. Jacamara's painting is the story of a whirlwind, a legend going back to prehistory in the time they call the dreaming. There is an unusual sign language version of Walbri for use in special situations.
No, nobody speaks a primitive language. All languages are extremely sophisticated. All human language constitutes a very, very sophisticated system.
Walbri turns out to be an inflected word-ending language, like Greek or Latin.
That was one word which I just typed into the dictionary there. Walbri is typically a language that has very, very long words made up of many, many meaningful parts. Unlike English, Walbri doesn't rely on the order in which words come in a sentence to convey the sort of meaning that order conveys in English. What Walbri uses instead are little suffixes which go onto a given word and which indicates the role of that word. So, for example, to say the boy kicked the ball in Walbri, we would say something like Wurialo, Pakano, Japu Japu. Japu Japu is the word for ball. Wuria is the word for boy. But to indicate that the boy is the doer of the action, we have an extra little piece on it, which is lo. So we say Wurialo. And then we have the verb Pakano, and then we have Japu Japu. In Walbri, the exactly same message would come across if I changed the order of the words, for example, and said Wurialo, Pakano, Japu Japu. Or Japu Japu, Pakano, Wurialo. Or I could say Pakano, Wurialo, Japu Japu. However, it doesn't matter what order the words are in, exactly the same message will come across that I am saying the boy kicked the ball.
However different languages may seem on the surface, underneath they seem to be cut out of the very same pattern. There are striking similarities of organization. In a way, it's like the human face. The human face is very simple. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. You can draw a simple sketch of it. But look at the incredible diversity. Each one of us has a uniquely different face, yet each face is obviously a human face. Languages are the same. Each one is obviously a different language, but they're clearly examples of the same kind of system.
One thing you might think to ask, it's actually quite an interesting topic to think about, is just how good is language at doing the job which it's designed to do?
Language serves a great many human purposes, but it can't do everything.
I mean, after all, if it's just a biological adaptation, which is what I'm suggesting, then you would expect that, like other biological adaptations, there would be limits on the fit between the job that it does and the job that it's designed to do.
Suppose I wanted you to meet a friend of mine at the train station. You didn't know this friend, and I didn't have a photograph of him, so I was trying to describe him. And he's about 5 feet 8 inches tall, and he has brown hair and a very ordinary face, and I'm sure he'll be wearing clothes. I don't know how to describe him to you, but perhaps you could meet him anyhow. Would you please?
Something which turn around and come down.
How can you explain the concept of a spiral? You almost have to make use of a gesture like that.
Can I use my hands? Sure. Spiral.
Like if I say, there's a leafy tree. Well, how leafy is it?
Something that twists around in like rotating circles.
Circular motion that's going, something like a slinky.
How leafy is a tree? If you look at it, you can tell immediately. But trying to describe it, I can't count the leaves and tell you how many there are.
Can one imagine a system that might communicate thought better than natural languages do? Well, certainly for some purposes.
For instance, giving directions to someone. Language is not as good as handing them a map and saying, look, I live here, you go right down like that.
You go down North Harrison Street, the street that you're on now, to Harrison Street, to Route 1.
Someone could describe a spiral without using gestures, but it would take a rather complex a series of sentences to do it.
A loop which proceeds in 2 dimensions. It goes rotational component and a component going transverse to that direction.
Make the left, go down, you'll see the state police barracks on the right left-hand side.
Jonathan Winters used to say, well, you go on down about a good 100 miles and take a right.
You'll travel back about 250 yards. You see a guard booth, you go to that guard booth.
Or is it a left?
The very nature of language design leads to the consequence that there are thoughts, which are perfectly fine thoughts, that are not expressible directly through the mechanisms of language. Language is a system with structure, and any system with structure and design has scope and limits. If it had no intrinsic structure and design, it could do nothing. It could achieve nothing. It would be useless for anything. But the very structure that it has not only provides it with its capacities, but also imposes certain limits on it. So, for example, say, take a tool, physical tool, say a hammer. If it was just an amorphous blob, you couldn't do anything with it. If it's a hammer with a particular structure, you can do certain things with it, but you can't do other things with it. If a tool is going to be useful for any purpose, it's going to have structure, and that's going to prevent it from being used for other purposes.
On the other hand, there's a lot of expressive power built into our linguistic capacity that's easy to overlook. I mean, people go around telling you things like, not only do maps show you how to get there easier than you could describe it, but moreover, single pictures are worth thousands of words and all that sort of stuff. In a sense it's true, in a sense it's also not. We can do things of great subtlety with language that it's very hard to imagine doing in any other way.
Much of the subtlety of language, of course, comes from syntax, but there's also subtlety in the words themselves. Words can be associated arbitrarily with anything. We think of them being associated with objects, but they can be associated with ideas, with abstractions, with anything you like. Words can be associated with anything you can think of.
Language is arbitrary. There's no connection between the thing and what we call the thing. It's abstract. You can talk about things that really aren't there, things that have no form. A word like form, for example. Now, what is the meaning of the word form? Or a word like truth, that terrible word that philosophers have discussed for so many thousands of years. What is truth? We don't know. We just have a word for it. It's an arbitrary word.
Love. What does love mean? What's love?
So language is completely arbitrary. Words are arbitrary.
It can be anything you want. That's not a light. That's a Lulu. Turn the Lulu on.
Even little kids know that. So my son, for example, he's 4 years old. He comes down for breakfast. He sits down in his chair and he says, "I want Gump for breakfast." And you say, "Peter, what is Gump?" And he looks and he says, "Gump is cereal."
So, for example, whether I call a tree, or whether I call it, say, a Baum, as I would if I grew up in Germany somewhere, that's obviously variable.
The thing and what you call a thing have nothing at all to do with one another.
Dinosaur.
Pancakes.
Infrastructure.
Different languages have totally different vocabularies, different names for the same things, different names for different things, depending on what they use.
Words for camel. The Arabs have dozens, if not scores of words for camel and lion and horse and other elements of their civilization.
The vocabulary of each language reflects the way of life of the people who speak that language. So people obviously need words to talk about the things they want to talk about.
If you live at the North Pole, bamboo is not important to you.
Mutaqaddid is a skinny camel. Khalous is a young female camel.
There's got to be a word for everything. Every little piece of this boat has got a different word for it. It's got all these lines here. Each one's got a different name for it.
This particular one is the halyard for the spinnaker, and over here the halyard for the burgee to fly a yacht club or other identifying flag from the top of the mast.
Rahila is a camel used for transporting loads. Ba'ir is used for camels in general.
That horizontal appendage projecting from the right side of the breastplate is the lance rest. The shoulders are covered by the pauldrons. The arms, including the upper, lower arm, and bend of the elbow, are covered by the vambraces, the left and right vambrace.
And so we have a topping lift to hold up the end of the pole. We have a halyard and a downhaul on the butt of the pole to raise and lower it on the track on the mast.
The shield is known as the escutcheon. And the steel-covered shoe is known as the sabaton.
What do you call these camels?
Well, I call them Pete, Jess, Tom, Joe, Jerry, and Billy.
The
word for Czech word for ostrich is pstros.
Stone. Grody. Elliptical.
Lunch. Pumpkin.
We just have a word for it, so we can talk about it.
Roughly speaking, the achievement of language is to provide a form of words that allows us to say anything we can think.
You can make all kinds of statements about conditions as you wish them to be, conditions as they might be, conditions as they were once upon a time, or conditions as they will be in the future. An animal cannot make this kind of statement, because this kind of statement is possible only by means of language.
Consider, for example, negation, right? It's easy to tell somebody that it's not going to rain. Try drawing them a picture of it's not going to rain. Or try drawing them a picture of, if I had let the hammer go, it would have fallen on my toe.
In language, you can say, if we drop this piano, it's not going to play Polonaise.
Think about trying to draw a picture of, there's not a giraffe standing beside me.
Here we are communicating about a world of our imagination. Imagination, if you like, is also a human construct.
The edge that language gave us, that no other animal has, no other being has, is the ability to think abstractly. That's really what language can do for us. We seem to have this drive to think abstractly, and we're propelled to do it. It's not even a choice. Because language itself is abstract, we seem to be led to think abstractly. Because we can think abstractly, we don't have to talk about what's in our immediate physical environment. We can plan for the future. We can create art. We can create complex social organizations. All of these things are possible because we can think abstractly.
Since my house burned down, I now have a better view of the rising moon.
Igqirha lendlela nguqongqothwane, igqirha lendlela nguqongqothwane.
Language, like any complex human phenomenon, can be studied from many different points of view. And contemporary linguists specialize. Some like to study words and their structures and see how the structures of words affect sentences. Some say the place to go is to work on the structure of sentences and worry later about what the words mean. Some people say unless you look at the role of language in conversations, in stories, and longer stretches of discourse, you'll never really understand what language is about. Now, in a sense, of course, they're all right.
We can't cut open the brain and look at structures that are involved in visual perception or in memory. But we do have language. We do have something almost physical. We have the record of what people say, and we can analyze that as data. So linguistics provides us with the most accessible window into the human mind.
We have this remarkable system that allows us to choose a form of words corresponding to the thought that we want to express. And somehow it's a system we manage to learn within a very short period of time if we're a child in a language community, and that we manage to access, to exploit, both from the point of view of the speaker and from the point of view of the hearer, instantaneously, easily, unconsciously, with no sense of effort.
So if you wanted to ask, what's the answer to the question? Is language simple or is language complex? It's simple for those creatures who use it. That is, the human brain is naturally evolved so that it uses a system of this apparently complex sort in a very simple way.
If a child is in an environment in which language interactions are proceeding, that language will grow in the child's mind, very much in the manner of other aspects of physical growth.
I take it as the current task of linguistics to ask the question about language, how much of it is built in and in what way, and how much of it is and must be learned by exposure to the environment of speaking people.
A question for the next in our series on the human language. How do children acquire language without seeming to learn it? Part 2, Playing the Language Game.